Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and this is going to be the first in a new Learning SQL in 2021 series. Okay, and basically what we're going to do is, for these first few videos, we'll be using SQLlite. Eventually we'll maybe graduate to Postgres for some advanced features and working with multiple databases. Okay, but bottom line, let's talk about what is SQL. SQL stands for Structured Query Language. Structured Query Language is a sort of universal way of talking to relational databases. So there's a lot of different categories of databases. And again, a database is just a place for storing data. But SQL is by far the most prolific of ways of talking to a database. It's so prolific that people have created tools so that way you can talk to other types of databases and even file systems using SQL, because it makes it really easy to describe what data you're trying to get from the database and be able to query the database, update the database, express all sorts of typical jobs you want to do with the database. So SQL can be used with many different situations. So there's different types of databases in the SQL world. First, we're going to use SQLlite. And SQLlite is meant to be sort of a lightweight SQL database, mainly for either one, learning how to do SQL, two, for using for development. So when you're developing a application locally, you have this really sort of simple to use database to kind of just see if your application works. Usually you would then use a more robust database like a MySQL or PostgreSQL when you then eventually deploy to the public. And what makes SQLlite different is that instead of you installing the software, so when you install Postgres or MySQL, those are other types of SQL databases, so it's pronounced SQL or SQL, whichever you prefer. Whenever you download one of those databases, they generally create a server, so they have this program running on your computer that allows you to manage many databases on your computer. SQLlite takes a different approach. Instead of having one server that's constantly running on your computer that allows you to switch between different databases, each database is its own file. Okay, and you can create databases anywhere you want on your computer, and then they're all isolated. Okay, which again isn't necessarily always ideal when you're developing an application, but for just getting started with SQL, it makes it much easier. So the first thing you'd like to do is you'd want to install SQLlite. And there's a lot of different ways to install SQLlite. So the best thing to do is go to the documentation. And honestly, probably even easier would to Google how to install it for your operating system. So like how to install SQLlite on Windows or on Mac, or on, for me, it's going to be on Ubuntu. Okay, I already have it installed, so that's taken care of. But look up for the proper tutorial for your operating system. Make sure it's a recent article. So, take a look at the years that the articles are released. So that way you're not following steps that belong to an older version. But if you want to skip all that, what you can do is you can use REPL. So that's REPL.it. And in REPL.it, you can log in. And then what you can do, okay, let me just do this, and refresh the page. Okay, let me go back to the main page. Here we go. That's where I want to be. So what you'd want to do is create a new REPL. So you'd click plus, or you can go over here and create a new REPL. There's a bunch of different buttons you can click to create a new REPL. A REPL stands for read, evaluate, print loop. It just means it's just kind of any environment where you could write some code, and then the environment reads the code. So read what you wrote, evaluate what you wrote, print the result so you can see what's the result of what you did, and then do it again. So loop. So it just keeps doing that, waiting for another line of code, evaluates it, prints the result. That's what REPL stands for. This website, REPL.it, is just a website that's named after the concept of REPL that creates environments for you to program in many different languages and contexts. So it's like a lot of different things you can try. So every time you want to try out a new language or something, you could do it here without having to install everything on your computer. So they do have a REPL for SQLlite. So you can see here, they have a REPL for SQLlite, so you can create that. And we'll start with that. because that's going to be sort of the easiest way to get started. Okay, and essentially what we're going to do is we're going to work with SQL files. We could also just go here in the shell. So just to kind of explain like how this works. It's like essentially this represents a file, and then we can run that file and we can see the results here in the console. Or we could operate in the shell, which is more like operating in like here, like in my terminal. Whether you're on Mac or Linux, you'd see your terminal and you'd see a little thing like this. That's what this shell is like. On Windows, you'd have something called the command prompt. If you want to have something more like this shell, then you would want to download software called Git Bash. But honestly, you can just operate here and you'll be fine as we learn how to write SQL. So just to kind of summarize, SQLlite is one of many different databases where you can use SQL to talk to the database. You could install SQLlite, okay, or you can create a SQL REPL. If you're new, this is probably going to be the easiest way to go, okay? So I will see you guys later on, and let's go.